Welcome. My name is Mark Blatstein, the physician founder of Physician Present Report Service and Physician Prison Consultant. Today, I'm going to review, finally, there is light at the end of the tunnel regarding First Step Back, Second Chance Act stacked together, and really working towards early release if you're eligible directly to home confinement. So I'm going to pull down here. This is my homepage, a little bit of Charlie Brown, and this I will keep updating to follow along as the new director, William Marshall, is tasked with implementing the changes that will expedite for those eligible to home confinement. And so by clicking on that, we're going to come up to the same next page. And so I'm going to have weekly updates to follow the new director of the Bureau of Prisons progress. But there is going to be, and there has been, there's challenges. And the challenges are in part because there's going to be case managers, there's going to be BOP employees. Some of them are going to be great and have your best interests at heart. And like everywhere in life, there's going to be those that are just out there to give you a hard time. And unfortunately, in life, we have to deal with both. So the ones that are really not working in your behalf are going to place the burden of their delaying to move you out according to your earned time credits on the fact that they're not getting any training or anything out of Grand Prairie, Texas, or for the Sentencing and Designation Computation Center. So this is where the new director of prisons has become very much of an active participant. Otherwise, the practice has been, if your sentence is greater than 60 months or 5 years, the last 6 months of your confinement of your term can be spent on home confinement. If your sentence is under 60 months or less than 5 years, 10% of your time can be spent on home confinement. But this is changing. And so we're going to pull down here the new director of the BOP, Director William Marshall, is tasked with implementing the changes that President Trump attempted to implement on his first term. And so what he did is that he basically got up and personal, both Director Marshall and Deputy Director Smith. And Smith had also a felony conviction 20, 30 years ago. And so this is probably still not very legible, but they made unannounced visits to several prisons. FCI Morgantown, they visited the Federal Medical Center in Lexington, USP in McCleary, and FCI Glimmer. And they spoke with both inmates as well as sometimes staff. And so, and they're worked by the premise that if you want to know what's going on, you have to talk to the people that are there on the ground. And so this is where they got their information, and they began to resulted in this task force that he has initiated. And the task force overview, at least in my opinion, is that they're able to identify individuals who currently are on halfway house or residential reentry centers who are eligible for home confinement and move manually to calculate. And he's going to have his team in the Sentencing and Designation Computation Center, as well as with the residential reentry managers. And they're going to be manually calculating these individuals to see if their home confinement dates are stacked accurately and have benefited from First Step Back and Second Chance Act dates. They're also going to relay these dates to the residential reentry managers to accelerate the transition, because what this is going to do is going to move people that are eligible for home confinement and don't need the extra time in a halfway house to kind of get themselves situated. That frees up bed space. Then it's going to work its way back into the prison system, again, starting with the Designation and Sentencing and Designation Computation Center. And they're going to be manually calculating and reviewing eligible incarcerated persons in the institutions to see who was most eligible to be released, either to home confinement or into halfway house or the residential reentry centers. So this I'm going to show you in an easier to see manner. But from Federal Legal News, FCI Bryan, Texas, case managers, and then they were writing to this newsletter that the staff has been pressuring inmates or prisoners to sign up for halfway house dates before their eligibility is accurately calculated, and even before they're eligible for home confinement. The wardens are telling them that this new mandate doesn't apply, and unit teams claim that they're waiting on the direction from Grand Prairie, Texas. At FCI Milan, the inmate said that he was told by my case manager, there is no guidance coming from the Bureau. And if there was, it's not our business. It doesn't give, the warm and fuzzy feeling to both families and to the inmates that they love their inside. FCI Coleman. This was a visit by Deputy Director Joshua Smith, again, as I said, who already had a felony 20, 30 years ago. And he did a largely unescorted tour of Coleman where he listened to prisoners' complaints about staff interference, and these were some of the complaints. Inability or unwillingness of the staff to properly place and calculate First Step Act and Second Chance Act earned time credits. Widespread use of group punishment. Seemingly institutionalized homophobia and racism exhibited by staff. And it's not just a couple of bad actors. Environment of something resembling a partial lockdown. Almost total lack of rehabilitative training, and only vocational classes that are regularly in use are horticulture, culinary. And this particular individual has been on waiting lists for over 5 years. 3 men to a room in a roughly 80 square foot, feet that was a violation of the congressional mandate regarding housing space. So I'm going to jump over now to the task force report. And I'll make this a little bit larger. Hopefully you can see it. And so now you can see the whole thing. So you can read it more easily if you go to the website directly. But he initiated the task force and he traveled across the country, and he noticed a pattern. Inmates are frustrated that their paperwork for home confinement under the First Step Act wasn't being processed, despite the Director Marshal's directive. But at the same time, the staff was telling them a different story. And so the staff told me that their systems that they rely on is not showing the correct date. The majority of the staff were doing their best with the information that they had. But unfortunately, they're taking the blame from inmates and their families who thought they're dragging their feet, which isn't fair to them. And it's true. Now, again, there's going to be people that are doing their best, that have your best interests at heart. But as in life, there's going to be people out there that just, they don't think they're not doing their best for you. They want to make your time there harder, or they just don't care. But for those who are trying, it's kind of like they're the middle child. And if you can relate to that, on the one hand, they're not getting the information from Grand Prairie, Texas, or from the people who are supposed to provide the calculations for them. And then on the other side are the inmates, you and their families. And so they're in the middle and they don't know what direction. The solution is that he created a task force at the Designation and Sentencing Computation Center to assist the Bureau of Prisons Residential Reentry Management offices by manually identifying and correcting these community placement procedures. And so they're giving basically the backup tools that they deserve to the individuals in the field on the front lines. And the task force is going to doing the final. They're going to identify individuals who are currently in halfway houses or in the reentry centers who are eligible for home confinement and try and move them, freeing up halfway house space. They're going to manually calculate the home confinement dates which when stacked implements both First Step Act and Second Chance Act credits, relaying those dates to the residential reentry managers to accelerate their transition of the inmates that are under their control to home, and at the same time freeing up bed space. These eligible incarcerated individuals now inside the individual prisons around the country, not going to happen overnight, unfortunately, but it's a foot in the right direction, are going to begin to have their computations addressed individually. And, we only can take them at face value that it's going to start with manually each person's individual earned time credits, Second Chance Act credits are going to be manually calculated with the First Step, this task force team providing oversight over those that work at the Sentencing and Designation and Computation Center. Additionally, this is the base person in charge, Rick Stover, Senior Deputy Assistant Director, who underscored the importance of this initiative because they know the staff and the inmates are frustrated by the complexity of these calculations. This is not new news. This has been going on since 2018. And so these are actually big moves by the current director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And it appears that he's taking movement in the correct direction. But for families that are at home, what you can do, in addition to individuals who are in prison right now, if you decide to do the administrative remedy process, you need to do the whole thing, BP 8 to BP 11, and then 2241. You have to do the whole thing and understand that there are deadline dates. The Bureau of Prisons doesn't have to abide by them, but you do. At the same time, you can go to bop.gov, which I just brought up here. You go to Contact Us, Report a Concern. And then you can put in your email, and then you're going to select whatever the prison is. And then over here, you're concerned. I would just put Rick Stover, Senior Deputy Director, Assistant Director, or put the Director Marshal of the BOP Director, William Marshall. And then I would have very specifically put in here all the different programs you've done, the dates you've done them, all the earned time credits, Second Chance Act. All of your information here is organized and spell checked and as neat as it can be, because they're going to work off this as a legal document, we hope. But it should mirror everything that you're doing elsewhere, because eventually a copy of this, which I would take before I actually send it, is going to be in your family's record at home. You can't do this from prison, but a loved one can do this from home. And so I hope you have found this helpful. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. If no matter where you are in the process, it's never really too late. If you want to engage my services, my phone 240-888-7778. I thank you for taking the time to listen today. I appreciate that time, and have a good and safe day.